pulling the strings on everything.
Okay, we're filming.
No, he was transitioned out.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like Joe Johnson's got his
Maybe
hands
turned a
full
little
for.
Yep.
He's like, what did I sign up for?
How's that?
Well,
That's probably
I got a new
Okay.
course in,
Can we see the whole thing there?
so I was reporting to Todd
Oops,
Huck.
yes. Sorry, my computer does this little thing every so often I want to fix.
Okay, yeah, we're good there. Okay.
That officially took place in
We are
January.
videoing, right?
Well, now with
Oh,
the
yeah?
change With Delsey leaving.
Just FYI, you're live. Tell them.
So they switched over to the sales side. And now I report to Enzo, who's the VP of operations. Temporarily, anyway.
But Chuck, the day is young.
Yeah, subject to change.
Organization our size, man. You know,
Edward, you might be in charge by the end of the day.
I'm going to stay in charge of Houston and just leave it at that. I have one of my managers, when they sent us a mandatory meeting, organizational change, got to be on this call. And one of my other managers texted me, "Oh man, I know you're in the loop." I said, "Man, I don't know anybody anymore." I have no idea what's going on.
all right.
All right, let me sit down.
You joining us, Chuck? I'm doing this presentation as if you are a group of engineers from a consulting firm.
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask questions. And so I'm going to ask what I would typically ask. Is there any question you guys have about a dry prime pump that you didn't know? That you've always been curious about, that you always wondered how does this work? How does this function? And I know who I'm asking that question, but it's a fair question. You know,
What's the difference in cost between a generator and a Godwin dry prime pump?
so that's a great question. And then, do you have a marker for this board back here?
Yes.
Somebody rearranged in here.
That's on the back side here. We can flip this around.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Set up.
There's everything you need. Here's an eraser.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that Scotch tape's gonna hold. Looks like an Aggie did that.
Forgive my penmanship, but that's one of the questions, and it's a great question.
Yes, sir.
If we're considering a different way of thinking. So, any other question? David, you're young. You've got to have something. What's a question you've had about a centrifugal bypass pump that you maybe just was curious about or didn't know or understand? Chuck, it's got to be something. We learn something new every day, right, sir?
Yes, sir.
So, Joey?
I'm trying to think here. I'm only halfway through this call.
How far can a bypass pump discharge?
Okay. What else?
I mean, this might not necessarily be specific to Godwin pumps, but when we're talking about the engines that are used to drive these, there's tier 3, tier 4. When
Good
and
question.
where would I want to use the different ones?
Great question. Okay.
Okay, I have one.
Yes.
We have a lot of installations that have small grinder pump. You know, they're serving 5, 10, 15, 20 homes. Some of them might get to flows of 100 gallons a minute. They're pumping through a small 2-inch diameter force main. What are your thoughts, or how can we, I mean, because the NC 100, 150, they're solids handling pumps. Anyway, what is your thought on an application like that using a dry prime backup on a conventional, like for a grinder pump station?
Great question. Great question. Yes, sir. I wasn't expecting that one. That's awesome. I like that. Anything else, Ed? Don't act like you know it all, even though I know you do. Teach me something all the time.
Why would you use this instead of a submersible?
Careful. Remember the company here. Just you're trying to muddy the waters, right? I think you threw some Jameson in your coffee or something. You're just being froggy.
What about fuel preference? I know that like during Harvey, we had a lot of cities that had contracts to bring diesel in for their
Excellent question.
things, and the
Excellent
government
question.
said no, we're going to do it, and they didn't do it. And so, I mean, are people preferring natural gas now over the diesel for that reason, or?
Yeah. Ed, I'm going to skip your question only because it doesn't apply correctly, smartass. That's why I love Ed.
How about, we always think about putting a dry prime backup in a conventional sewage or stormwater type pump station, but what about for a booster station for clean drinking water? Are there other pump options that do we have a good solution for something like that?
Great question.
All right.
Excellent. I think we got enough to roll with. And if you come with more, please, feel free to ask. So cost, pump versus generator. How far can a bypass pump discharge? What is Tier 4 engine technology? What force main diameter works best with a dry prime backup system? Fuel concerns that they have. What fuel options do we have? And does DBS work in a clean water or potable booster application? So my name's Bruce Countryman. I was born and raised in Northern Illinois. Grew up in a dairy farm. My dad was also an educator. We moved after the Carter years, after Dad and his brother sold the farm down to South Carolina. And I've lived in Greenville, South Carolina since 1983. Now with my new role, right out of college, I've had a couple different careers. I was a UPS driver for 15 years. I was a lot skinnier then, and until I got hurt and decided I needed to do something different. So my career path took me to a big rental house called Sunbelt Rentals. And when I was there, I got involved in their pump and power division, which really piqued my interest. But when I got to that division, 6 months later, the crash hit in 2008, and just some things changed with that. It was not a great time for me to have made that move. But I've been with, since then, I've been with another rental company. I was at Continental Engines, where I was a service manager, and we serviced 900 generators over 3 different states and 8 different counties. And then I had tried to get in with Godwin Pumps when John Paz still owned it, back when I was at Sunbelt, because there was a great amount of things that I was not taught and I was not understanding just about hydraulics in general. So when Ed and Joey and I got hired at Godwin Pumps, all of us went to this Pumps 101 school, and so here I am 25 years later out of college, and I go to this class. Ed had it for 2 weeks, Joey and I had it for 4 days, and then you take a big test on Friday and you have to pass that test. And so Thursday night I'm cramming all this information in, and one of the young guys that was a mechanical, had an engineering degree, came and helped me with some of the formulas, and we got done kind of getting ready for the test the next day, and he says, "You okay?" And I'm rubbing my head, and I said, "No, it's been 25 years since I've been in school." And he goes, "Well, Bruce, congratulations, you got a semester's worth of mechanical engineering in 4 days." I was like, "Really?" He said, "Oh yeah, it's a lot of, it's intense information, but at the end of the day, we base all of our decisions off of 3 criteria: flow, elevation, and distance." And what experience has taught me, and then that comes from the teacher in that classroom named Peter Snow. Chuck, I don't know if you've met Peter.
Yes, a few times.
Yep. And so a phenomenal educator on pump systems and hydraulics, but one thing that he can't teach is field experience. And so field experience also taught me to understand egress and mitigation. Egress being, how do we make the pump function with the design that we have, for either whether it's new or an existing design. How can we make this thing fit? And the mitigation, just designing in a way that the owner is going to be happy with this type of setup. So as you well know, Godwin's history, it's been around a long time. John Paz bought the distributorship for Godwin Pumps of Americas in 2001. He grew it so big he went back and bought the parent company. And Godwin's been around for a long, long time. Basically, this is how a dry prime works. You've got a suction line, and in that suction line, actually, this is what drew the Paz family to the Godwin pump. They were on vacation in England, and they saw his dad saw as we all do, contractors and engineers, he saw a construction site, and they took this orange pump that at the time was built on a hay wagon type chassis, and they backed it up to the hole, and they threw a suction line in, and they threw a discharge line in, and they turned the pump on, and it started pumping. And he was dumbfounded because up to that point he had always and only seen them pour water into the top of a pump to make it prime. Well, how was it working? So what they had designed was the use of compressed air, forcing it through a venturi or like a nozzle, which creates a vacuum. And it's kind of like, I like to equate it like this. It's like if you get in a car and someone lights up a cigarette and you get about 20 miles an hour and crack the windows open, that air rushing across the car will pull the atmospheric pressure out of the car. It's the same concept. We're forcing air down inside that suction hose, and that's what draws the atmospheric pressure out of that hose. That's what draws prime. You have a non-return ball. This little ejector ball is when you turn the pump off and it settles back in, it's what will hold prime. That can be an issue in cold weather applications. Maybe not around here so much, but where I live, where you have January days that are 10 and 15 degrees, we get those in South Carolina, believe it or not. That ejector ball can get stuck up top and not release, and so it will not hold prime. Doesn't mean the pump won't prime when it fires back up, it just won't hold the water in the line. And of course, the Godwin pump was one of the first ones to have a liquid bath mechanical seal, which means this is why we call it a dry prime, because this pump will prime by itself and it can run dry indefinitely. That impeller stays cool, and so if you run out of flow, the pump's not going to get damaged because of it.
So another question, how long can a Godwin pump run continuously without stopping?
As long as you can keep fuel in it.
David, you have a call on line.
Service every 250 to 500 hours, depending on, the warranty requirements is service every 250 hours. When it gets out of warranty, most guys change the filters every 500 hours. So what does all this have to do with your project? We wanted to look at a better approach to a station, and this is a typical lift station. You've got your wet well, you've got your utility power, you've got a backup generator, and you've got your switch gear. And we looked at this situation. This actually was taught to us by a municipality. They drove this change. We looked at it and said, where can the system fail? You've got city power, generator, transfer switch, control panel, and a beautiful flight pump, hopefully, down in that wet well. And with failure comes potential sewage spills. They got reporting issues. It smells. It's bad in the neighborhood. Adverse community response. Nobody likes to be on the news because a spill was created. And this is a traditional lift station temporary solution where we use a portable pump. That's a very old picture. I need to update that picture. But you've got your pump, suction hose, discharge hose, controls. And that's typically what people had done up to that point. So there was a municipality in Alabama that started buying 2, 3, and 4 pumps at a time from us. Different sizes, different ranges, and after about the 15th pump, somebody said, go down there and find out what they're doing. So what they were doing was they were buying the pump like it sits, taking it down to Alabama, knocking the axle off, and permanently setting it up at their lift stations because somebody down there said, let's stop using generators because of certain other failures that were going on.
About what time frame was that when the municipality in Alabama?
Ed, would that be 20 years ago?
Yeah, I'm not sure when that, bad happened a long time ago when they did that study.
20 plus.
At least 20 plus years ago. So the options are you can use existing lift station design, upgrade equipment, and improve maintenance practices, which addresses electrical failure, or you can consider a new and a different approach that will address both mechanical and electrical failure. Because the propensity is that these things will fail at some point in time. So we came up with a proven alternative. We eliminated the switchgear, we eliminated the generator, but there's something that needs to be considered, and there's always a challenge for municipalities. There's a difference between what we come up with in engineering and what the operators have to deal with when it's out there. I mean, how many times have you guys heard an operator say, I'd love to meet the engineer that came up with this crazy idea that we have to deal with at this time? So a lot of this was designed for operator convenience. And municipalities are honestly driving this change. Consulting firms will specify this, but the municipalities have to drive this change. They have to want this technology as their resource for it to become a viable solution for them to be willing to spend the money on it. That's who we are typically marketing this to. 90% of the time when I was at Continental Engines that I got a service call on a generator that was not working, quote unquote, was not the generator. And 90% of the time it was the switchgear, because you can program a generator to exercise, every week, 20 minutes at a time. Okay, that generator's working, but if it does not transfer power, those contactors get dirty, and a lot of times that just doesn't transfer power. Now, a pump and a generator are extremely similar. On a pump, you have a engine, you have a control panel, and you have a pump end, size to whatever specification you're trying to meet. A generator, you have a engine, a control panel, and an alternator end, and it has a set point. It's going to run at 1800 RPMs, which produces 60 hertz revolutions. That's how that generator works. It's going to run at that same speed no matter what load you put at it. Okay, so if your power goes out, the generator's running constantly, whereas a backup pump is only going to respond to what the level of the flow is in the water. Make sense?
It does. One question. So when the switchgear transfer switch, is that an automated process, or does a human have to be involved?
Well, it can be either. You can either buy a manual transfer switch or an automatic transfer switch.
Mm-hmm.
In an automatic, you can still do it manually. But again, if those contactors get dirty, then everything has to be shut down, de-energized in order for them to go clean the contacts.
Is that the number one cause of failure? Just when the transfer switch doesn't transfer power to the pump?
That is, like I say, it's 90% of the failures.
And that's caused by dirty contacts?
Dirty contacts.
Well, one of the other things we've seen is when they transfer over to the generator from utility power, if that voltage in that generator is off or different than what the utility power was, then your phase monitor or other power protection device will block the pumps from running on the generator because they're not synchronized.
Right. I remember, yeah, that happened at a startup one time.
So there are a lot of other little things that got to be harmonious for it to always work perfectly.
So a few years ago, about 4 years ago, I got a call from a guy named Barry down at Lawrence County, South Carolina. My wife and I were walking in a church, and he said, "Hey man, I know you stopped by the other day. I need your help." I said, "What you got?" And he goes, "I got a lift station where one pump is down, the other one's shaky." And so I went through my questions. What's your flow elevation distance? How much is my suction lift? What is the discharge distance from where the pump's going to set? Do you have a real estate? Do you have equipment to offload? There's about 20 questions I'm going to ask him, but I can't make any decision on an emergency bypass setup without knowing flow, elevation, and distance. And one of the things at Godwin that we provide is contingency plans. So we go to a municipality and we can take one of their operators, go to every lift station and design a book that says, here's what you're going to need in the event of an emergency. And again, you've got that information, but if the municipality is going to spend the money on a generator, why not spend the money on a pump? Which goes to our first question: what is the cost of a generator versus a pump? Well, if it's a small lift station, let's say it only requires a 20 kW generator, honestly, the generator's cheaper. Until you get to about 30 kW, that's when the cost effectiveness of a pump starts making sense. Just strictly looking at the cost of a generator versus pump. But that situation with that guy Barry, it took me from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. of my time that we had to bill for their time to help install the thing and get the thing set up and running. And then the next morning at 8 o'clock, or it was like 7, I said, hey Barry, just want to check, everything going okay? He said, yes sir, and your pump is running fantastic. And I said, well, wait a second. I said, I thought mine was now the backup. He goes, Bruce, if I'm lying, I'm dying. 5 minutes after we installed your pump, my other pump took shit and I need another pump. He said, I got to have a duplex system and we don't know how soon we can get these things fixed. So from that call at 7 a.m. until about 9 o'clock that night, it took me that long to get the same size pump from out of state and come out and tie it in, and we're snapping all the pipe together and bolting everything up. And as soon as we got done, and the guys that were helping us put this together, and of course it's pouring on rain, this is costing, all of this is cost rolling for the municipality. By the time we got it set up, I said, all right guys, just stop, like that. And they all looked at me like at 3 hours, Bruce, what are you doing? I said, and I slowly turned, and I said, look at that brand new Caterpillar 150 kW generator. How much good is the money you spent there doing you right now? And they all looked at me and they're like, if the pumps fail, the power isn't going to help us anything. A lift station's sole purpose is to pump sewage to the next high point or to the sewer plant. There is no other reason it's got to be there. So the cost of putting that together was our time, our freight, the man hours. So it's not just the cost of the pump versus the generator. It's the cost of, if everything fails and the generator's not going to do what needs to be done in the midst of some type of a problem or outage or failure, it's the cost of what does it take to get it there. Some of my emergency bypasses have been huge. I remember I was at Oconee County. It's about 20 miles south of Clemson, Oconee County Joint Regional Sewer Authority. They're a sewer treatment plant that handles about 6 or 7 different cities. And we had a 7-inch rain in 2 hours that came in and it flooded their influent pump station. So they call me that evening, of course it's Friday, 5 o'clock. Hey man, what's going on? Bruce, we got an emergency, our lift station's down and we had all this rain. I said, do I need to come now? And he goes, no, it's still flooded, don't even come to tomorrow morning. So what I did was I brought a contractor with me and we went out there and assessed the situation. They did not have a bypass connection. So what I was looking at doing was setting up pumps to pull from their wet well, go up a 95 degrees vertical hill to go to the headworks and pump it up the hill. I was going to have to put temporary piping up there. And the contractor and I talked about it and I said, I think we can solve their problem with greater ease here and give them something in return that they can take, that they can use moving forward. So what I asked them was, I said, we got to get this done. We know what you're asking us to do. And the challenge at the headworks up there was they had different size, I don't know who designed it, but it was a train wreck. And I said, you don't have a bypass connection down here at the influent pump station, do you? And they said, no. I said, all right. I've got Greenstone Construction Contractor here with me. They're going to help me with this project. I have expensive option A. I have expensive option B. Expensive option A is I'm going to bring in these pumps. I'm going to bring in the pipe, my fusion tech. These guys are going to help me. We're going to get it set up the hill. We're going to start bypassing. It's going to take us about 3 days to get everything together and in and done. Expensive B is you're going to let the contractor do a tap on your force main and give you a bypass connection. And I'm going to bring my pumps in with just some composite hose. And in about 3 days, they're going to have all that set up. And then at the end of that, you now have a bypass connection to your influent pump station. B, I mean, they didn't even waste a second saying, please take us to this option, because they know if it happens again, it's going to save them that much more money the next time. So,
Do you have pictures of that bypass connection that was tapped into the force
Sure.
main? I'd love to see those, or have them for our presentation.
sure.
Thanks.
I can get them from Drew.
If you
So-
go and look on like a College Station job, they have they show it They have a suction line and they have a bypass flange on all of their pump stations they put in.
Nice. Okay.
But it'd be it's a good, probably a really good, I'm sure, but it's a good illustration.
Cool.
So if we use this proven alternative, a backup pump, we can handle 100 station redundancy. You got automatic priming without operator assistance. Our pumps have solids handling capability, an automated control system to start and stop the pump based on the flow requirements independent of existing control systems, sound attenuation, and weatherproofing under, sometimes we get freezing conditions. So the generator can handle loss of utility power, but a DBS pump can handle loss of utility power, transfer switch malfunction, control panel failure, automatic control failure, submersible pump failure, 100% redundancy, and then scheduled preventative maintenance. This solution provides all those answers to this. Now, the operator, again, this is for, as if I'm talking to a consulting engineer, this is helping. We're doing this to help you protect your client and so that their operators can use this efficiently. It's a sustainable solution. So where can the system still fail? Remember what I said about the pump and the generator? It's an engine, it's a controller, it's a pump end or an alternator end. What two components, and we talked about this yesterday, what two components do they need to maintain and understand and watch? Battery life and fuel, which goes to David's question. What are the fuel options? So typically it's diesel, but we also can provide a Ford or GM engine offering and give them a natural gas or propane option.
So you do have propane also?
If that's the case.
Okay.
I mean, propane and natural gas is the same engine, you just change the orifice.
Oh, okay.
But, dadgummit, it better be a big propane tank.
Right.
It's not,
I had that question one time and I didn't know. It
Yeah.
caught me off guard.
yeah,
so
it's
I
just
was
changing the orifice on it. That's
Yeah.
all it is.
Okay.
And you have to get with the natural gas company, and so there's a little more coordination there because you have to, just like designing a pump system, they have to know the amount of gas, flow and pressure that they've got to be able to provide for that engine to work.
Right.
So we have to have that, what is the, what's the term for it? What is the water column required to provide for that gas engine? But we can do that. I mean, that's not a problem. We've done it. So in Henderson County, I sold two of my first DBS pumps I sold. They did natural gas engine selections, and they still have a bypass connection apart from my pump, and they have a manual transfer switch. And I said, Greg, why are you doing that? And he goes, Bruce, I understand. I liked your product the best. I want every option available. It didn't cost me that much money to put in a manual transfer switch if I wanted to drag a generator in here and plug the thing in. I was like, okay, I get it. I'm fine with that. He just wanted to give himself options because he's the director, but he's been an operator and he knows he wants to have more than one solution to be able to solve his problem. So that kind of solves the fuel issue. Let's talk about that for a second. We talked about it yesterday, didn't we? Chuck, do you know what the shelf life is for diesel fuel? Throw a guess.
With the additive, maybe a year. I don't.
Perfect. It's a year. 9 months to a year is when algae starts to grow in diesel. And when I was at Continental Engines, we heard a pop. The lights went out. They came back on. Our generator came back on at our office. What happened was there was a dump truck trying to text down the road. It lost control of his truck, knocked out the power, and then a generator, a half meg generator, at an office complex on the other side of the road from us that we serviced, started failing. It was blowing black smoke first, and it was not producing enough power. And they call us, and we go rushing over there. And here's the problem. And for that company, it was right at the end of September, because it was not only the end of the month, it was the end of their quarter and the end of their fiscal year. And they have a power outage, and they're trying to close their books, and we can't provide power. And I've got coats and ties out there, MFing me up and down, and we were like, hey, we service the generator. We asked to service the fuel, and you would not let us. You could open the cap, the big cap on that thing, and you could see chunks of crap just floating around in the fuel. So what I always talk about to the municipalities, I want to talk to your operators, and I want to talk to you about a BMP of either tank polishing, which is nothing more than what we do when we return a rental unit. Because here's what's happened. Here's how Ed has resolved fuel issues after a pump rental. Right. Somebody, Joey rents a pump to a contractor, ABC, and they get done with the job and they say, "Hey, fill the pump back up with fuel so that Joey doesn't charge me $10 a gallon when it goes back to the rental company." Well, I don't have a fuel card. Well, go by Paul's farm back there, and the fuel tank behind the silo, it's got diesel fuel in it. And so, and I'm making up a story, but honest to God, the crap that they go put back in our pump at the end. So we have a practice. Ed brings the pump back in. We suck the fuel out. It goes through a siphon, through a water separator, and and then we put the fuel. That's tank polishing. We filter it out. We put the fuel back in. So my best management practice suggestion to operators, doesn't matter whether it's a pump or a generator, suck the fuel out after a year, go put it back in your big tank, because you can mix 10% of older fuel back in, and it's gonna even out and be fine. And then you put a fresh pot of fuel in the tank, and it'll be fine. You can treat it with what's the seafoam, Ed?
Yeah, seafoam or any additive.
Yeah, any John Deere makes an additive, different additives. You can get another year of shelf life out of it that'll kill the algae, but you can only do so long. So go back to that story. What happened was all this crap went up into the common fuel rail of the generator. We went from black smoke to white smoke to blue smoke, and it died. So it doesn't matter whether it's a pump or generator, you got to keep your fuel clean. So managing diesel can be a problem. If you have natural gas available, let's look at the size of the pump and see if we have an engine big enough that'll run that. That would be my suggestion on that. Typical remote lift stations can range and flow from 0.2, 3 MGD, dynamic heads ranging 30 to 80 feet. And I'm sure you guys are going, well, I've seen some with bigger than that. A permanently installed diesel pump would be sized to handle 100% of peak flows during an average 24-hour period. We like to size it. Let's say you have 3 internal flight submersible pumps. We would size it to handle the flow of all 3. Again, you can select a diesel, natural gas, propane. Your controls, you can either use float switches or level or pressure transducers. With your suction and discharge piping, heat traces, and insulation, stainless steel drain lines. That guy Greg from Henderson County had a stainless steel carryover line. He had a stainless steel suction line and a stainless steel discharge line because he did not want to have any long-term issues with that pump. It's going to be there a while. Think about it. What most of the time, we call on the same people, right? Municipalities. Joey will tell you this. I'm always educating my guys. You got to understand how they're governed and how they're funded, because that tells you everything about the type of money that they're going to spend on the project. If you have a municipality that's run by a commission with people that are like engineers and stuff,